September 1939. The world had just plunged into its second Great War in a generation, while the Wehrmacht rolled across Poland and Britain scrambled to mobilize. A different kind of threat prowled the vast expanses of the South Atlantic Ocean. She was the Admiral Graf Spee, a German pocket battleship that combined the firepower of a battleship with the speed of a cruiser, a predator designed for one purpose: to destroy Allied merchant shipping and strangle Britain's lifeline. The Graf Spee was commanded by Captain Hans Langsdorff, a career naval officer who embodied the old Prussian code of honor. Tall, methodical, and deeply principled, Langsdorff was no Nazi fanatic. He was a sailor of the Imperial German Navy tradition, a man who believed in duty, discipline, and, crucially, the laws of the sea. This distinction would prove fateful in the days to come. The ship herself was formidable, displacing over 16,000 tons and armed with 6 11-inch guns housed in 2 massive triple turrets. The Graf Spee could outgun any cruiser and outrun any battleship. Her armor plating could shrug off most cruiser shells, and her advanced diesel engines gave her an exceptional range of 20,000 miles. She was, in effect, the perfect commerce raider. By early December 1939, the Graf Spee had already claimed 9 British merchant vessels in the South Atlantic and Indian Ocean. Each time, Langsdorff had followed the same chivalrous pattern: stop the ship, allow the crew to abandon safely, then sink her with gunfire or scuttling charges. Not a single merchant sailor had died at his hands. But in London, the Admiralty was growing desperate. Hunting groups of British and French warships scoured the oceans, searching for this elusive ghost. Commodore Henry Harwood was a student of naval warfare and possessed something his colleagues often lacked: imagination. As commander of the South American Division of the Royal Navy's America and West Indies Station, he had a daunting task: protect thousands of miles of shipping lanes with just a handful of cruisers. But Harwood had been studying the Graf Spee's movements carefully. He plotted each merchant sinking on his charts, analyzed the patterns, and made an educated guess. The German raider would eventually be drawn to the rich shipping lanes off the River Plate estuary, where the commercial heart of South America pumped goods to and from Buenos Aires and Montevideo. In early December, Harwood made his move. He concentrated his small force off the River Plate, the heavy cruiser HMS Exeter and the light cruisers HMS Ajax, his flagship, and HMNZS Achilles. It was a calculated gamble. If he was wrong, the Graf Spee could be anywhere in the vast Atlantic. If he was right, his 3 cruisers would face a ship that outgunned them all. HMS Exeter was the heavyweight of the group, carrying 6 8-inch guns. Her captain, Frederick Bell, was a no-nonsense officer with a reputation for thoroughness. The Ajax and Achilles were lighter, each armed with 8 6-inch guns, weapons that would struggle to penetrate the Graf Spee's armor. The New Zealand crew of the Achilles brought a fierce colonial pride to the fight. Together, they represented a force dramatically inferior to their potential opponent. Harwood knew he couldn't win a slugging match. His plan was audacious. If they encountered the Graf Spee, they would split into 2 divisions. Exeter would attack from one side while Ajax and Achilles engaged from the other, dividing the enemy's fire and exploiting the pocket battleship's inability to fight effectively in 2 directions. It was textbook tactics on paper. In practice, it would require perfect coordination, aggressive leadership, and a great deal of luck. December 13, 1939, dawned clear and bright over the South Atlantic. The sea was calm, visibility excellent, perfect hunting weather. At 0552 hours, smoke was spotted on the horizon. Exeter's lookouts reported a possible contact bearing northwest. Harwood faced a decision. The smoke could be anything: a merchant ship, a neutral vessel, even one of his own supply ships. But his instincts, honed by weeks of careful analysis, told him otherwise. He ordered his ships to investigate at full speed. As the distance closed, the silhouette became clearer through the morning haze. The distinctive profile was unmistakable: a heavy tripod mast, 2 massive gun turrets, one forward, one aft, and the angular superstructure of a German warship. After 3 months of hunting, they had found her. The Graf Spee had been making for the River Plate exactly as Harwood had predicted. Captain Langsdorff, standing on his bridge, initially mistook the British ships for a single light cruiser escorting a convoy. It was a critical error. By the time his rangefinders identified 3 warships, including a heavy cruiser, closing at high speed, The tactical situation had already shifted in favor of the British. At Aero 6:18 hours, at a range of approximately 19,000 yards, Graf Spee's forward turret thundered. 3 670-pound shells screamed through the morning air toward HMS Exeter. The Battle of the River Plate had begun. The opening exchange was catastrophic for the British. Graf Spee's third salvo straddled Exeter, shells landing both short and beyond, the classic indicator that the next salvo would hit. Exeter's Captain Bell ordered evasive maneuvers, but the pocket battleship's fire control was devastatingly accurate. At Aero 6:23 hours, the inevitable happened. An 11-inch shell smashed into Exeter's forward superstructure, penetrating her bridge. The explosion was horrific. Captain Bell was wounded by splinters. The ship's communications were severed and half the bridge crew were killed instantly. The navigator, Commander Graham, died at his post. The ship's steering was jammed, sending her veering out of formation. But British sailors were trained for this nightmare. Within minutes, Bell had shifted to the after-conning position. Emergency steering was established, and Exeter's guns continued firing. Despite the carnage, the heavy cruiser maintained her course toward the enemy, following Harwood's plan even as her lifeblood poured onto her decks. Meanwhile, Ajax and Achilles raced in from the opposite side, their lighter guns opening fire. Harwood's plan was working. Graf Spee was forced to divide her attention. Her after turret swung toward the light cruisers while her forward turret continued hammering Exeter. For HMS Exeter, the next 20 minutes were hell incarnate. Another 11-inch shell penetrated her forward section, causing massive flooding. The ship developed a list. Another hit destroyed her A turret, killing or wounding the entire gun crew. Fire broke out amidships, yet still she fought her B turret. The only forward gun still operational continued to fire under local control, the crew manually training and elevating the guns without the benefit of the central fire control system. It was gunnery as it had been practiced in Nelson's day, but with modern weapons, brutal, direct, courageous. At Aero 6:30 hours, disaster struck again. A shell exploded in Exeter's A turret working chamber, and the flames spread to B turret's magazine. Only the quick flooding of the magazine by damage control parties prevented a catastrophic explosion that would have destroyed the ship. Exeter now had only her 2 after turrets operational, and she was heavily damaged, on fire, and listing badly. Captain Bell faced an agonizing decision. His ship was being pounded to scrap. His crew was dying around him, but to withdraw would leave Ajax and Achilles to face the Graf Spee alone. He chose to fight on, using Exeter's battered hull to absorb punishment that might otherwise fall on his consorts. Finally, at 0640 hours, with only 1 turret still firing, 61 dead and 23 wounded, Bell accepted reality. Exeter turned away, laying smoke to cover her retreat. She had absorbed more damage than seemed possible for a ship to survive, and she was still afloat. Her sacrifice had bought precious time. With Exeter withdrawing, the full weight of Graf Spee's firepower shifted to Ajax and Achilles. But something had changed. The British cruisers were now inside 12,000 yards, close enough for their 6-inch guns to be effective, close enough that their superior speed and maneuverability mattered. Harwood ordered his ships to close further, accepting terrible risk to bring their lighter armament to bear. The 2 cruisers weaved and dodged, their gunners firing as fast as the loading crews could work. Shells splashed around them like a deadly fountain, but they danced through the patterns of destruction. At Aero 7:25 hours, Graf Spee's luck changed. An 11-inch shell struck Ajax's after superstructure, destroying both her after turrets. Her mainmast came crashing down, taking with it crucial fire control equipment. 24 men were killed in an instant. The blast was so violent it jammed Ajax's rudder temporarily, sending her careering in circles. But Achilles fought on, her New Zealand gunners maintaining a rapid, accurate fire. And crucially, the British were scoring hits. Though their shells couldn't penetrate Graf Spee's main armor belt, they were finding weak spots: the superstructure, the deck plating, the unarmored sections. Langsdorff's bridge was hit. His navigation bridge was destroyed. His rangefinders were damaged. Most critically, splinters from a near miss opened a hole in the bow, allowing seawater to pour into the forward sections. By 0740 hours, the battle had reached a critical juncture. Exeter was out of action but still afloat. Ajax had lost half her main armament but was still fighting. Achilles was undamaged but running low on ammunition, and Graf Spee, despite her superior firepower, was hurt. Not mortally, but hurt nonetheless. Langsdorff made a fateful decision. Rather than finish off the wounded British cruisers, which he could likely have done, he turned west, toward the neutral port of Montevideo, Uruguay. His ship's water purification system had been damaged, limiting his range. He had casualties to treat. The bow damage was affecting his seaworthiness. Most significantly, he believed British reinforcements must be close. Surely these 3 cruisers were merely the advance guard of a larger force. It was a reasonable assumption, but completely wrong. Harwood had no reinforcements within 1,000 miles. If Langsdorff had known this, if he had pressed the attack, the outcome might have been very different. But the British had achieved something crucial. They had created doubt in the mind of their opponent. Harwood, his flagship damaged and his heavy cruiser barely afloat, chose to follow. It was an extraordinary decision, to shadow a superior enemy who had just mauled his squadron. But Harwood understood that the battle wasn't over. It was simply moving to a different arena. The running fight continued intermittently as Graf Spee made for Montevideo, with Ajax and Achilles maintaining contact just beyond effective range, like wolves trailing a wounded bear. As night fell, the silhouette of Uruguay's coast appeared on the horizon. At midnight on December 13th, Graf Spee dropped anchor in Montevideo's outer harbor. Under international law, a warship of a belligerent nation could remain in a neutral port for only 24 hours, unless it required essential repairs. Langsdorff immediately sent his damage reports to the Uruguayan government, requesting 2 weeks for repairs. The Uruguayan authorities found themselves in an impossible position. They were neutral but sympathetic to the Allies. German pressure demanded they grant the repairs. British pressure demanded they expel the ship immediately. After frantic consultations, they reached a compromise: 72 hours, enough time for essential repairs to make the ship seaworthy, but not enough to fully restore her fighting capability. Meanwhile, outside the harbor, Harwood maintained his vigil. Ajax and Achilles patrolled just beyond Uruguayan territorial waters, waiting. But Harwood knew his situation was desperate. His ships were low on ammunition and fuel. Exeter had limped away toward the Falkland Islands for emergency repairs. Against a fully functional Graf Spee, his 2 remaining cruisers would be hopelessly outmatched. This is where British intelligence and propaganda turned the battle in their favor. In Montevideo, British agents and diplomats launched an elaborate deception campaign. They spread rumors of massive British reinforcements converging on the River Plate. Ships were mentioned by name: the aircraft carrier Ark Royal, the battlecruiser Renown, the heavy cruiser Cumberland. Some of these reports were accurate. Cumberland was indeed racing to join Harwood, though she was still days away. Others were complete fabrications. The neutral press in Montevideo and Buenos Aires eagerly reported every rumor. German intelligence officers, working frantically to assess the situation, found their information contaminated by British disinformation. Every merchant ship arriving in Montevideo was scrutinized for signs it might be reporting the positions of British warships. German agents watched the horizon with powerful telescopes, looking for the telltale smoke of approaching reinforcements. Aboard Graf Spee, Captain Langsdorff faced his own crisis. His casualties were moderate: 36 dead, 60 wounded, but his ship was hurt. The bow damage was serious, limiting his speed and seaworthiness for ocean operations. His ammunition for the main guns was reduced to less than 60% capacity. His water purification system was damaged, severely limiting his operational range. But more than the physical damage, Langsdorff was psychologically battered. The 3 British cruisers had fought with a ferocity and skill that shocked him. They should have broken off, should have withdrawn after Exeter was crippled. Instead, they had pressed home the attack with what seemed like suicidal courage. If a few cruisers could fight like that, what would happen if he faced the battle cruisers and aircraft carriers reportedly approaching? Langsdorff received conflicting orders from Germany. Hitler wanted a propaganda victory. The Kriegsmarine wanted their ship preserved. Some advisors urged him to break out at night, others to intern the ship in Argentina. Langsdorff, methodical and conscientious, analyzed every option. The clock ticked down. December 14th passed in frantic repairs. December 15th brought more work, more intelligence reports, more pressure. December 16th arrived and Uruguay's deadline loomed. Graf Spee must leave by 8 p.m. or be interned for the duration of the war. The Battle of the River Plate had captured global attention. In a war of swift German victories and Allied retreats, here was a different story. 3 British cruisers taking on a superior enemy and forcing her to seek refuge. Newspapers around the world carried daily updates. Radio broadcasts beamed news across the Atlantic. In Montevideo, crowds gathered along the waterfront watching Graf Spee through binoculars and telescopes. The ship had become a tourist attraction, a living exhibit of naval warfare anchored tantalizingly close to shore. Small boats carried journalists and photographers as close as the authorities would allow. The drama was visible, tangible, and everyone wanted a front-row seat to history. British expatriates in Montevideo and Buenos Aires worked frantically to support the propaganda effort. They spread rumors in bars and cafes. They contacted friendly journalists. They maintained the fiction of overwhelming British naval superiority, gathering just over the horizon. And crucially, they prepared for whatever came next, whether Graf Spee made a run for it or accepted internment. On the evening of December 16th, as the deadline approached, the tension was unbearable. Would Langsdorff fight his way out? Would he attempt a night breakout? Would he allow his ship to be interned? At 6:15 p.m., Graf Spee weighed anchor and began moving toward the harbor entrance. The waiting was over. As Graf Spee moved slowly through the harbor, thousands watched from the shore. Ajax and Achilles, now reinforced by the heavy cruiser Cumberland, waited beyond the 3-mile limit, their crews at action stations. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and red, an appropriately dramatic backdrop for what everyone assumed would be the final desperate battle. But Graf Spee wasn't heading for the open sea. She was heading for the shallow waters of the outer harbor. At 7:52 p.m., she dropped anchor again, this time in less than 30 feet of water. Then systematically her crew began abandoning ship. Langsdorff had made his decision. He would not risk his crew in a battle he believed he couldn't win. He would not allow his ship to fall intact into British hands, and he would not suffer the humiliation of internment. There was only one option left that preserved honor and saved lives: scuttling. Throughout the night, the Graf Spee's crew worked methodically. Scuttling charges were placed throughout the ship. Confidential documents were burned. The wounded were transferred to a German merchant ship. At dawn on December 17th, the final crew members boarded boats and headed for Buenos Aires, where Argentina's government had agreed to grant them internment. At 7:54 p.m. on December 17th, the scuttling charges detonated. The explosions were thunderous, visible from both shores of the River Plate. Massive columns of flame and smoke erupted from the pocket battleship. Her ammunition magazines detonated in secondary explosions. Within minutes, the ship that had terrorized the South Atlantic was a burning, settling wreck. Harwood and his crews, watching from their ships offshore, saw the flames and understood. There would be no final battle. They had won not through superior force but through courage, tactical skill, and psychological warfare. The Graf Spee was destroyed not by British guns but by British determination. The crew of Graf Spee was interned in Argentina, where they sat out the remainder of the war. Most were treated well, though they endured the frustration of captivity while their nation fought. Some eventually settled in South America after the war, unable or unwilling to return to a shattered Germany. For Captain Hans Langsdorff, however, there was to be no comfortable internment. The burden of his decision weighed heavily upon him. He had lost his ship, the ultimate failure for a naval captain. He had followed orders that led to this outcome. He had failed to break through to the open ocean. On the night of December 19, 1939, in a hotel room in Buenos Aires, Captain Langsdorff laid out his naval ensign and the flag of the old German Imperial Navy, the service he had joined as a young cadet. He wrote letters to his wife and to the German Naval Command, explaining his actions and taking full responsibility. Then, lying atop the flags of the services he had honored his entire life, he shot himself. His suicide note read, in part, "I can now only prove by my death that the fighting services of the Third Reich are ready to die for the honor of the flag. I alone bear the responsibility for scuttling the pocket battleship Admiral Graf Spee. I am happy, to pay with my life for any possible reflection on the honor of the flag. It was a tragic end for an honorable man caught in an impossible situation. Langsdorff had conducted his commerce raiding with humanity and restraint. He had fought skillfully when cornered. He had chosen to save his crew rather than seek glory in a suicidal last stand. Yet in his own mind, shaped by Prussian military tradition, he had failed, and that failure demanded the ultimate price. For Commodore Harwood and his crews, there was celebration, but also deep reflection. HMS Exeter, grievously wounded, had made it to the Falkland Islands and eventually to Britain for extensive repairs. Her crew were hailed as heroes. Captain Bell received the CB, Companion of the Order of the Bath, and numerous crew members received gallantry medals. MS Ajax and HMNZS Achilles returned to the Falklands for repairs and refitting. Harwood was promoted to Rear Admiral and knighted, becoming Sir Henry Harwood. He had proven that aggressive tactics, creative thinking, and determination could overcome superior firepower. The Battle of the River Plate became a desperately needed propaganda victory for Britain. After the shock of Poland's fall and the frustrating phony war on the Western Front, here was proof that British forces could take on German might and win. The fact that it was a naval victory, echoing Britain's proud maritime tradition, made it even sweeter. The Battle of the River Plate stands as one of the most significant naval engagements of World War II, not for its strategic impact, but for what it revealed about naval warfare and human courage. Tactically, it validated the principle that inferior forces, skillfully handled with aggressive leadership, could overcome superior firepower. Harwood's division of forces, though risky, worked exactly as planned. The battle demonstrated that modern fire control systems, while powerful, could be overwhelmed by threats from multiple directions. The battle also showed the evolving nature of naval warfare. The Graf Spee, designed as the ultimate commerce raider, was ultimately defeated not by naval action alone but by a combination of light force engagement, psychological warfare, and diplomatic pressure. Modern naval warfare required more than guns and armor. It required information, deception, and understanding of international law. For Germany, the loss was both material and psychological. The Kriegsmarine had invested enormous resources in the pocket battleship concept. To lose one so early in the war, under circumstances that made it appear the Royal Navy had hunted her down and cornered her, was a significant blow to morale. The battle reinforced Hitler's existing skepticism about surface raiders, eventually leading to a greater emphasis on submarine warfare. For Britain, beyond the immediate propaganda value, the battle demonstrated that the Royal Navy still possessed the offensive spirit that had made it supreme for centuries. At a time when the outcome of the war was far from certain, when many questioned whether Britain could stand against German military might, 3 cruisers had taken on a superior enemy and won. That moral victory would echo throughout the dark years ahead. The wreck of the Admiral Graf Spee still lies in the shallow waters off Montevideo, a rusting monument to a bygone age of warfare. Over the decades, she has been partially salvaged. Her rangefinder, eagle emblem, and other artifacts now rest in museums. The main wreck, broken and scattered, remains a popular dive site and a reminder of those dramatic days in December 1939. Periodically, proposals emerge to salvage more of the wreck or remove it entirely. Each proposal reignites debates about war graves, historical preservation, and the proper treatment of naval wrecks. For now, she remains where Langsdorff's charges put her, a ghost ship in shallow water, visible at low tide, a monument to courage and tragedy on both sides. The Battle of the River Plate was decided in less than 90 minutes of actual combat, followed by 4 days of diplomatic and psychological maneuvering. Yet it remains one of the war's most celebrated naval actions. Why? Perhaps because it captured essential truths about warfare that transcend tactics and technology. It showed that courage and skill could compensate for material inferiority. It demonstrated that battles are won in the minds of commanders as much as through the power of weapons. It revealed that honor and humanity could coexist with the brutal business of war. Langsdorff's restraint toward merchant crews, his choice to save his own crew rather than fight a pointless battle, contrasted with the very different face of warfare that would emerge as the war progressed. For the men who fought that day, the British sailors who charged into the teeth of superior firepower, the German sailors who fought skillfully until their captain made the difficult decision to end it. The battle was a test of everything they had trained for. They measured up. In the vast and terrible conflict that would consume the world for 5 more years, producing battles of far greater scale and consequence, the Battle of the River Plate remains a touchstone, a reminder that even in industrial, total war, individual courage, leadership, and moral choices still matter. 3 cruisers against a pocket battleship, determination against firepower, and ultimately, the human element triumphing over the material calculus of war. The Graf Spee is gone, but the story endures, a story of ships and shells and brave men on both sides, doing their duty in a cause they believed in, under skies and seas that have witnessed human conflict since ships first ventured beyond sight of land.